Welcome to the Green Dialogue, and today John Sarver is going to be delving into the Homeowners Energy Policy Act of 2024. John is a member of our energy team, our environmental commission, member of GLREA, Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and he got a Volunteer of the Year award in Meridian Township last year, I believe, one of two. Welcome, John.
Yeah, I can't, the area where I can start from the, kind of expand is blocked by the.
Press escape, and maybe your screen will minimize temporarily.
That didn't work. Yeah, because I can't, is there another way to go full screen? Let's see.
See if you can move the window of people. Is that what's blocking it?
What's blocking it is the top band of commands.
But escape didn't do it?
No.
How about stop sharing your screen for a second? And then try again.
Try again, okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. Now this time it worked for some reason. It's always a mystery.
Oh.
I got just a few slides to talk about the new Public Act 68 and called the Homeowners Energy Policy Act, which relates to HOAs and prohibiting them from prohibiting solar systems and energy saving equipment. So it was signed by the governor on July 8th. And I found out there's over 8,400 HOAs in Michigan. So about 7% of the homes in Michigan are covered by an HOA. Actually, I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been higher. And but 29 other states in the District of Columbia have similar laws. And some specifics. It's going to be. The vote was on a partisan basis, and so there weren't enough votes to make it immediate effect. And so what happens is that when that happens, you have to wait till the end of the legislative session, and then there's another 90 days. And so nobody knows when the legislative session might end. So it could be effective April 1st, or it could be a little earlier. But beginning on the effective date, any member of an association who wants to install an energy system can submit a written application to the HOA. Within 1 year after the effective date, each homeowner association shall adopt a written solar energy policy statement. Now that's going to be tough to make even people aware that such a requirement exists. But I'm guessing the way it'll work in the real world is somebody will have a problem in Meridian Township. They'll call up Leroy, and Leroy will say, oh, no, they can't do that anymore. There's a law, and he'll refer people to the law. And then the homeowner will go to his board and say, hey, you guys can't do that, and give them the law and, kind of go from there. Now, one thing that's important, the law does not apply to shared roofs, condominiums, or common areas. So it won't help those folks who live in a condominium. Now, Public Act 68 actually mentions a whole bunch of stuff that HOAs can't do. But the list is too long for me to put it in a slide. But the law also included a whole bunch of other energy saving improvements. Now, I kind of thought it was interesting. Clothesline was at the top because over the years, I have heard that there's a number of HOAs that forbid clotheslines, and some people wanted to do that, and it became kind of an issue. A lot of the other ones, I didn't even know if an HOA would get involved in worrying about rain barrels and EV chargers. But I think the legislators figured, hey, we'll cover everything. You know, we're doing a law, we'll just kind of cover almost everything that could become an issue. Now, there is some denials for rooftop solar that an HOA can do. The court has found that the installation violates some law, and I can't imagine what that is. I installed a system that doesn't conform with the application. The solar energy system will extend above or beyond the roof by more than 6 inches. This system doesn't conform to the slope of the roof. And the solar system has a frame support bracket that is not silver, bronze, or black tone. And so recently I asked a guy from Absolute Solar, I said, is that an issue? And he said, no, I mean, that's just, if somebody did any of those things, it wouldn't be typical practice. So those potential denials almost never will come into play, at least the way things are done by the industry now. The other possible denial is that, and this has to do with ground mount, the solar energy system will be installed in a fenced area, and it'll be taller than the fence. And now one thing that I scratch my head about is, what if there isn't a fence? You know, I think there is some township regulations, though, about the height of stuff you can have in your yard. But, you know, I'm looking at the playground equipment next door to me, and actually that stuff is pretty high. That must be like 12, 14 feet. So if there is a requirement, well, I have no idea if there is a requirement, what it would be. My last slide is basically Ann Arbor, City of Ann Arbor, the Sustainability Office have come up with a model policy statement to make it easier for HOA boards to comply with the law. And there's the link at the bottom of that slide, and I'll put that in the chat box too. And those are my slides. And are there any questions? I think it's kind of straightforward, but that won't mean that there won't be a bunch of HOA boards that go, what? And you know, I know in my neighborhood, the HOA board doesn't meet very often, maybe twice a year. And I don't know if that's typical or not. Sarah, you're the president of your HOA, right? How often do you meet?
Not very often. I mean, so much now so much now is done by email, but board wise, probably once or twice a year, but we interact a whole lot more with, you know, in between that with just doing email stuff. I manage so much of the complaints that I don't have to include them until it's like a bigger deal. But yeah, probably twice a year.
I'm kind of curious, when presented with this, what do you think your board's how do you think they're gonna respond? Are they gonna go, oh, no big deal?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally really, really excited this went through, so I don't have to deal with it, because now I can just be like, put solar in your house. I don't care. I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to. I will get complaints from certain people, or I could have, and I will be able to be like, I don't have to do anything. So I'm
Right.
thrilled, because I have people who are wanting to do solar, including myself. And I was like, put it on hold, just wait, let's wait. And you know, but I am going to encourage people to, you know, try to put it on the back of your house if you can, because I think that's what the people will be most bothered by. And when I had Blue Raven come, they were like, oh yeah, we don't put them on the front of the house, which I don't think is necessarily true. I think plenty of people do, but that is what I know was going to be my biggest issue, is people were going to complain about the front of the house. So, but no, I'm thrilled. So I'm personally going to put it up on our Facebook page so that people in the neighborhood know that it went through, so that, you know, they can just know that it's a possibility for them to go forward, that they don't need to bother me with it, and we can just do it, so.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to your comment about, here you're in a position of authority or, well, sometimes you probably wonder if you have any authority. But there can be so many of these things become kind of like divisive in neighborhoods or communities. And that's maybe one of the functions of state laws and township ordinances. It just eliminates the issue, it's the law, we got to do it. And I know a lot, well, I keep hearing that this is an issue for folks. And so, yeah, it's just become a non-issue.
I know there's a kind of a fairly major distrust of government in our society. And if people didn't have the background we did on our energy team, I could, hearing people's complaints about their ability to put solar on because their HOA won't allow it, I could see where people might question this this law. Say, what's government trying to do to me now? I'm not sure how best to tell this story in a way that seems like people are getting more control versus government overreach. But
Yeah, I think it's not completely an unusual situation where, you talk about freedom, right? Okay. So the one way to look at it is the homeowner should have the freedom to do what they want with their own property. Another way to look at it, right, is the community, in this case, the neighborhood, should have some rights about regulating what happens in their neighborhood. And so, yeah, why should local government or state government tell the HOA what to do? But yeah, it goes both ways, right? Because who gets the freedom? Is it the freedom of the homeowner, or is it the kind of the jurisdiction of the neighborhood? And the same thing is happening with the statewide siting of solar and wind, utility scale solar and wind systems, because the argument both ways in the same, can't the farmers do what they want with their own property? And then the other side of the argument is, well, wait a minute, why is the state usurping the authority of the township or county to kind of manage their own siting decisions? So, yeah.
I want to thank or welcome Danielle for joining us. Danielle's got a lot of experience working with communities around Michigan through the Green Communities Network, and maybe presenting at a future dialogue. So welcome, Danielle. Feel free to chime in if you want to add to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I work for a statewide organization, but I'm local. I'm literally on the border between East Lansing and Meridian Township. I'm in East Lansing, but on the Commission on the Environment here. So, but work with Leroy quite a bit through Michigan Green Communities, and I've met John through some of this work as well. So just thought I'd join in today to see what this is about. But I do agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think at a certain point, though, people's right to produce their own energy outweighs their neighbors' rights to determine what it is that they look at on their neighbor's roof. Is the way that I see it, I guess. But not everyone will buy that argument. I know that in our neighborhood, we do have we have a neighborhood association with voluntary dues. There are some covenants. I'm still trying to figure out like what level of authority they actually have. But I know that we do have some solar panels on homes around here, but we'll see if this causes any conversation in our community too.
Danielle, since you've been in the job, have you heard many people talking about this issue, that the HOA restrictive covenants have been a problem, or haven't that come to your attention?
I haven't heard a whole lot of chatter about it. I just joined the Commission on the Environment in East Lansing like a couple months ago, so I haven't really heard anything on it. I mean, we're currently participating in the Solarize Group Buy program, and that just came here a few weeks ago in East Lansing. So we're getting quotes to put solar on our house right now. So I guess I'll find out if any of my new neighbors are mad about it. But I haven't really heard anything about it. I think the water issues lately have been the biggest thing that we've been hearing about in our community. And then around the state, I'm not really hearing a ton about this particular piece of solar. Of course, with like the renewable siting legislation, a lot of consternation over that, but nothing really over the HOA thing.
Well, and I think it's interesting when I was reading about this going through and stuff, and there's a certain group that are opposed to it. And when I was reading what their defense against it was, I was like, there was basically no defense. It's like, oh, you're going to affect, I mean, I was like, that's not even a defense. So.
Any other questions for John, or we can sort of open the dialogue up to whatever people would like to talk about. Welcome, Brian.
On a different note, I just had a trip to Switzerland with a grandson and a daughter, and this gets back to native plants. And I was a little surprised. The Swiss are pretty neat. Everything's pretty clean. And so I was kind of surprised. A lot of this is in Zurich. A lot of the public spaces, like the little area around a street light or even parks and stuff, are completely native. You look at it and you go, my goodness, looks like all weeds. And it seemed kind of out of character, but of course the city is saving a ton of money not having to maintain all those public spaces. They just let them go wild. And I was kind of surprised because we've had all these discussions over time about the township regulating how tall the grass can get and what things look like. And boy, apparently at least in Zurich, they don't, not a problem. That's just their kind of policy.
Did you get any pictures, John?
No, I should have. You're right. I should have. I was just taking pictures of the mountains, the lakes, chocolate, but no, I forgot to take pictures of the weed.
Speaking of native plants, Danielle recently shared an interesting story about her neighborhood and recent flooding. I don't know if you can probably share it better than I can, Danielle, but just in terms of future topics and what one of the common themes of these conversations over the last couple of years has been in terms of native plants and reducing connection with flooding.
Yeah, I mean, the recent storm that we had, right, when the remnants of Hurricane Beryl came through, and then we all got that like 4 inches of rain in a couple hours, right, kind of localized around. Seems like it kind of missed Lansing, but was more like East Lansing and the township. I mean, we had water halfway up people's cars in the streets. Like we had some serious flooding, but as soon as it stopped, of course, like the storm drains did what they needed to do and cleared all the water pretty quickly. But talking with one of my husband's coworkers who lives on the other side of Lake Lansing from us, and he's like, oh yeah, we had absolutely no flooding in our neighborhood at all. And I mean, we're talking about like, 100 feet away from us, like where there was flooding and not flooding from that. So the city of East Lansing is working right now on a few things, a like impervious surface assessment. They have projections for rainfall and whatnot for between now and 2100, and then we're doing some community surveys to put that all together. But I really would be interested in learning more from Meridian Township about some of the work that you all have done to improve or to reduce flooding through like native plants and bioswales and whatnot in some of your neighborhoods, because I honestly don't know how that conversation is going to go in East Lansing and some of the neighborhoods. Some people will love native plants. Other people I think are going to hate it. So I'm just kind of curious to see how those conversations went in your community. And then, yeah, I mean, it was pretty significant flooding that, got into basements and whatnot. And then anecdotally hearing that there wasn't really anything just right on the other side of Lake Lansing from us was really interesting.
That's the Tower neighborhood where they had the bioswales and tried
Mhm.
quite an extensive effort to control the stormwater through natural mechanisms rather than pumping it a couple miles to the Red Cedar. Had a saving money through that big project, which was not without headaches, but that Tower neighborhood has been sort of a demonstration area for several years. Which is
Did
right
they,
across the street from White Hills where Danielle lives. So the contrast is interesting.
did
Danielle,
they do fine with the flooding? Did Tower do fine with the flooding or no?
That's what my husband's coworker who lives in Tower, he said it was fine. He said they
Okay.
had no issues really in the neighborhood, in the Tower neighborhood.
Okay.
Danielle, this is Kim. Do you know if they determined whether or not the flooding was due to, overcapacity of the storm drains, or was there some other factor in there?
I'll have to double check with the staff at the city, but I know that we have that. So I've only been in East Lansing for a year myself. 5 years prior to that, I was in the east side of Lansing. My husband grew up in East Lansing, but so I've been in the area for a while, but now like actually living here, things are, you get a more intimate view of things. But from what I have heard, I think that it might have been capacity. So like at a certain point, because we have combined sewer overflow as well. At a certain point during some of these larger storms, the city will shut off the wastewater treatment plant to allow for that overflow to just run off. That helps. Obviously, there's pros and cons to combined sewer overflow versus separating out your storm sewers. But as far as I would have to ask, but I believe that it might have been a bit of a capacity issue.
One other thing, you mentioned some people not being, very interested in native plants, but one of the ways to kind of get around that or to make it more appealing is to, when you put in the natives, throw in some annual seeds like zinnias and sunflowers and borage, things that bloom, kind of all summer long, so that
Okay.
times in between the blooms on the native plants, there's still something there to give it color and make it look like it was intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Also anecdotally, our house is a duplex. My parents live on the other side of the house. And my dad was a professional landscaper, and he tends to be one of the people who's more interested in the non-native plants, but also because
more
they're easier
showy
to work
stuff.
with. So,
Yep.
yeah. So we don't really
You
have a
can
whole
do
lot of
both.
natives in our house right now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can do both. You can combine them, and, I'm turning a section of my backyard, well, and eventually I hope all of my backyard into native plants and that, but there's still room to throw in things that are non-native, to kind of give it more, not year-round color, but, more bloom time in the summer.
That's a really good point.
So
ahead.
Danielle, I'm just curious, did you do some work in Albion before coming to this area?
I did, and I saw your name, and I was like, "Is that Sam Lovell of PB?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have a new last name since I saw you last.
I do have a new last name. Yeah, I have a new last name and a kid and another one coming. But
Yeah.
we're small world. So you're in Meridian Township then?
Well, I grew up in Meridian Township, and I'm trying to retire, but I actually live in near Tawas, between
Okay.
Tawas and Escoda.
Okay, and I know
But
where that is. That's where.
it's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. I've got family up in Oscoda as well.
Yeah. Well,
Small world.
I spent a lot of time in East Lansing and Hazlet, so
Yeah.
I know where you are now. So
Yeah, good to
great.
see you.
Good to
I
see
was
you.
like, when your camera was off, I was like, I'm not sure if that's the same Sam, but I thought it might be. So good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, Bill, I put your email in the chat or something. We'll have to catch up a little bit.
Will do.
How did you guys cross paths?
We did
Calhoun
some.
County.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say the Calhoun County Trailway Alliance. Sam did some extensive mapping out of like potential routes for the Great Lake to Lake Trail. through Calhoun County when I was working in the city of Albion, and then for a trail project that we got DNR trust fund for money for. Sam was on the team that designed the section of trail that went through Albion, Michigan.
We had a lot of
Cool.
fun doing all that.
Yeah,
Wow, small world.
it is.
What are some of the issues that you've heard about, Danielle, and the Green Communities Network that you think might be a good dialogue for, and anybody else can chime in, but for the future? And you could be the speaker or not, a facilitator or not, but I'm just,
Sure.
what do you think we should be talking about here in Meridian? And, or East Lansing, or collaboration between the two communities?
You know, with me being relatively new to East Lansing, I feel like I should hold off on that answer and talk with the rest of the commission on the environment and like cliff walls and whatnot over here. But no, I mean, the thing with the Michigan Green Communities Network, I can talk more about it later. I do actually have to hop to another meeting in just a minute, but I'm back to back this morning. But you know, there's a lot of really cool things happening throughout the state and different local governments of all different sizes and geographies and whatnot. So if there are things out there that people in Meridian are interested in, I'm sure there's other communities out there working on it. That's kind of the beauty of the network that we have. So yeah, I mean, right now water's the big thing in East Lansing, but it seems like Meridian Township is a lot further ahead on stormwater management than we are. So
That's come with kicking and screaming. A lot of people were against the drain commissioners work. But
Yeah.
hopefully, maybe, or are you willing to come back next week and talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about this span of things that you've been dealing
Yeah.
with?
Absolutely. And at that point too, we'll have wrapped up a fellowship program that's run through U of M where they do some really cool innovative projects with local government. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us for the first half here. And anybody else have any parting comments before Danielle hops off?
Yeah, this is Kim again. Hey, and I don't know that anybody on the call has this information, but with regard to the Drain Commission, I know Ingham County Drain Commissioner can rub people the wrong way, but I think he's done a lot of really good projects with regard to stormwater management. But I'm wondering, in other, this is based on a comment I heard at one of Sam Singh's coffee hours. The Shiawassee Drain Commissioner has, you know, a completely different view of how things should happen. And there was a comment, something about where Shiawassee County, just north of Hazlitt Road, you know, along Lake Lansing, or not along Lake Lansing, but the Meadow, whatever subdivision up there, that all their stuff, the way the drains were set up, runs into Ingham County. And I'm just wondering if there is, you know, some correlation there with some of the flooding in East Lansing, since they put up all that new construction north of Lake Lansing Road. You know, I was wondering how much coordination there is between drain commissioners in different counties. That might be something to look into.
That's a really good question. Yeah, I'll bring that up with our commission. And
yeah,
see what we can find.
I know you have to leave, so feel free to tune out whenever you, or stay as long as you can, Danielle. But
all right.
Great question, Kim.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
It's a great question. Brian is, oh, Brian left for a moment, but Brian lives in Bath. I'm not sure if that's Shiawassee County.
I think
that
so.
would be Clinton.
What'd you say, Tom?
I think that would be Clinton County.
Clinton, right, Clinton.
Yeah, the comment that I heard was that whole subdivision drains into Lake Lansing, you know, the actual lake. And that was one of the reasons they were having trouble with that dam over there. But I don't know that there's any truth to that. It was just a comment that was made at the coffee hour.
Well, that's a good question. I know Giannis on our staff is involved with Lake Lansing quite a bit more than most of us. And Brian, who's in Bath, might, and in the planning, might have some insights into that. But we can find out. That'd be a great topic of discussion. What else is on people's minds? Not to change the subject, but I mean, this is regional collaboration, I think, is just another area that kind of ripe for opportunities. And I'm excited that Danielle is interested in getting involved with this group, but also sharing what's going on in East Lansing with looking at stormwater risk assessments and her personal experience being on the border of Meridian and East Lansing. And then also connected to U of M students who have been doing work in over a dozen communities across Michigan on projects that are near and dear to those communities' hearts. So hopefully we'll learn more about that next week.
Lorraine, too, just kind of a side note, I met Danielle quite a few years ago. I can't remember exactly how many, but she was pretty fresh out of school. And it was very apparent that she was going to be achieving great things just with what I observed with her work in Albion. And I just want to tell you guys how lucky you are to have her here. She's great.
That's a great story. And having worked with students and citizens who are just inspired and on fire with a passion about what they're working on, it's just, I think it's those people that are going to save the planet.
Exactly.
How do we cultivate more of that sort of creative energy and support it versus the doom and gloom that we also hear a lot of?
Right.
Really.
Not that we can't have doom and gloom, Brian. I'm just teasing Brian.
Based on my last 48 hours, I've had enough doom and gloom. I'm just happy to be in the office today. Okay.
Is it something you want to share?
Not particularly, no. I can talk to you back channel if you want, but yeah, I'm happy to see you all and I'm glad I'm here.
Thank you.
Joining.
We're glad you're here.
Did I miss actually, did you talk about the solar legislation and the homeowner association stuff? Can you repeat what you said? Because I missed. No,
How about the elevator speech, John? You can practice on us.
I had a specific question, but that's one of the things I didn't write it down and I cannot remember, but if I come up with it in the next 23 minutes or so, I'll let you know.
Well, the short speech about the new Public Act 68 is that if you're a homeowners association now, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can't prohibit, including solar systems and clotheslines, and but it doesn't apply to condominiums, which is always a question for me because the law specifically say it doesn't apply to shared roofs, which is a condominium, right? But the other thing we were talking about earlier is that once it's effective, which is probably March or sometime, all the homeowners associations have to come up with an energy policy statement, which Ann Arbor has been helpful because they came up with a model policy. Because, boy, if they hadn't, GLREA probably would have come up with something if Ann Arbor didn't, because you can just imagine how much work would have to be done by some poor board trying to figure out what to put in their policy. Well, now, they can look at Ann Arbor's model policy and then say, we don't like it, but what the heck? All in favor, say aye,
I'm going to repost that because you might not see it in your chat window, Brian. John shared that earlier. That's the model policy that might be something to take, the planning commission would be interested in.
Well, we don't regulate homeowner associations, but if they bring it up, that, thanks for the link. I'll keep that in mind.
I liked the summary that you made, John, about freedom. And it's basically freedom of the homeowner association to regulate what you can put on your roof, or freedom of the resident to decide to use alternative energy or energy efficiency. And there's some tension between those, but we all value freedom. And it seems like the freedom of the homeowner in this situation outweighs the freedom of the, how something's going to look in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think typically too, certainly state government, but maybe probably townships too and cities, they're reluctant to interfere with folks' rights, including HOA's rights to have restrictive covenants. But whenever you get into a deal, right, where there's some other public goal, in this case, getting rid of fossil fuels and promoting renewable energy, it kind of tips the scale, I think, to, yeah, we should let homeowners do that.
It's interesting that this issue about native plants and grass height and, landscaping regulations is also kind of a related area where, are you free to let your grass grow or let the native plants grow? And what's the balancing point between community standards and personal freedom? I think we've discussed some happy mediums. Go ahead.
Well, Kim put in a question about condos, and yeah, actually, we had I may have mentioned this before. Down the road from me, Joe Hess, I don't know, it took him a year or two. He's in a condo to get his association to kind of buy into a policy that he had to develop. But he was successful in finally getting his board to approve a solar system. And after he put one in, at least one or maybe two other neighbors did too. Condos, right, have some legitimate issues because you're talking about the condo associations responsible for roofs, right? So, you have to kind of think in terms of, okay, if somebody puts a solar system on a roof, who's responsible for it? What if it has to be taken down? What if it doesn't work anymore? So the condos are a different sort of situation, but I know of some that have worked it through, but then there's a bunch that, haven't made any progress.
Yeah, I just started thinking about it. You'd have to have kind of everybody that was under the shared roof agree to it. But yeah, the whole maintenance and I don't know, verifying that everything was done correctly and everything, since the exterior of condos is the responsibility of the association, that's kind of creates a whole different set of headaches, I imagine.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a very different situation. One thing I wondered about was that, I've seen some condos where it's rare, but you have almost a standalone building or a standalone home. Usually they're more like duplexes, but I was kind of wondering if that situation, if you were kind of a standalone condo, whether your roof would be considered shared. It might still be considered shared because the condo association probably owns it and is responsible for it. But I don't know. The lawyers will probably deal with that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Would it make sense to have like Joe's policy also available if If others in condos are asking.
Yeah, well, actually, we do have GLREA does have a modified version of Joe's policy because Joe's policy was too restrictive and kind of over the board. I mean, over the, to me, it was just more than was necessary. And so I kind of abbreviated that, and that's available for anybody who's looking for kind of like a policy for a condo association.
Awesome.
They might consider, I know, some condos have, uh, individual garages and things, but some have, shared parking area, shared garage type things. They might consider putting solar, doing like a parking lot solar type thing in some locations. That wouldn't work for people that have individual garages probably, but I don't know. Just an idea.
On a totally random note here, I'm just coming back to this idea of how do you frame this conversation about sort of freedom of the person versus freedom of the community or the collective? And how do you find that balancing point? How do you have a dialogue about what makes sense versus immediately jumping to condemning government for overreaching? How do you, what are some visuals that you might use or ways of framing that can take the conversation to a new level versus the just stupid thinking and lack of dialogue that we have when we address some of these things come up, whatever the tense issue is. What's the role of dialogue and coming up with a compromise or a win-win? Yeah. Just
Well, I think
ahead.
part of it is you have to look at, with regard to solar siting, you can't just look at, farmland or, agricultural land as your only place to put solar panels. I mean, look at the parking lot arrays at MSU. There's a lot of places that you could put solar panels. You've got every Meijer and Walmart parking lot. Where you run into issues is when you put up those solar arrays, that's added value on the property. So you have pushback from, the big box store people because that elevates their taxes, or at least it should. So I know that Sam's gotten some pushback on that. But with regard to agricultural lands, there is, nobody wants to take good productive land, or they shouldn't anyway, agricultural, especially, food product type agriculture, out of production. But there are farmers who are aging out of farming and whose children don't want to be farmers. And if they can, turn part of their property into a solar site to increase their income or to cover their energy costs, why should their neighbor deny them the ability to do that? And not all farmland is farmable. There's always, some swampy area or something that just doesn't, isn't conducive to farming. But you can also graze sheep under solar panels. I mean, there's a lot of different things. It's not all of one or all of another. It's got to be a mix.
It seems like Sam Singh is pretty good at hosting conversations, and he's got a process where you can surface some of these complex issues in a creative way. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is like, how do we just not make stupid decisions?
When are his coffee hours?
They're listed on his website. They vary. He's got Ingham, Clinton, and Shiawassee County, so they vary between the three counties. And he usually has one or two a month. He usually has two, and one is a virtual, a Zoom call type thing. But You know, the other ones are spread between the 3 counties, the in-person ones. But if you look at his website, you can, actually, I can probably put it in the chat. Just give me a minute.
It seems like there's been a general dumbing down of society. And I'm just overreacting perhaps, but a traditional decision-making process in a community, I think could be revitalized a little bit by having more spaces to just get into issues a little bit more versus automatically taking sides or blaming government or blaming the developer or blaming the public, whatever. And the 3-minute time limit at a public meeting just doesn't really do the job.
Well, I'll counter with that isn't the time to have the dialogue you're talking about.
Yeah.
The time to have that is during the master plan meetings. And when you only have 3 people showing up on a consistent basis, that's a very tough dialogue to have. And that's something planners have wrestled with. There was a shift a few years, it wasn't right away when the internet became a thing, but I've talked to other planners about this. There was a point in time when suddenly people stopped going to stuff, and it wasn't COVID, it was before COVID. And I remember pretty clearly at a conference hearing about how do you get participation, and this was down when I was in Kentucky, so I was in the Cincinnati region. So we have Tri-County. Our analogous down there was Cincinnati, and it had counties in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. So I had 3 states worth of planners talking about how all of a sudden they couldn't get people to come to meetings. And then OKI, the region, said, we just did a plan and we took a different tact. And that's the first time I've heard of somebody doing a survey online. And they got 2,000 responses for their regional plan. And that's been the trend that I've observed. Certainly other planners have talked about, that I've talked about, you know, if you could get people to a table, you can have those conversations. I don't think it's that people are getting dumbed down. I think that people are forced to make more, they're forced to prioritize their time more than they used to be. I feel it. I don't, you know, in my personal life, I don't read like I used to. Of course, I don't read like I used to. I have to play Fallout, you know, I have to get on my Xbox. Why would I read? I didn't have that 10 years ago, you know?
I think of the what Sam mentioned about the cross-state trail system and how a vision for something really cool can emerge and happen. And how do we have more success stories? Maybe we just need to be aware of those success stories and the processes are used to create those scenarios. But you know, most people aren't going to fit with the timeline of the master plan or even know about it necessarily.
Oh, I don't know if I agree with that 100%. I mean, we have a very active communication team, and we push out social media posts about stuff all the time now. And we had a very specific effort regarding our master plan. Now, I will say we didn't have a big traditional powwow meeting with more boards and maps and stuff like that. That's a true statement. We didn't. But
Yeah.
if you've got an active online presence and people are following you online and they don't hear about it, that's on them at that point. It's no different to me, in my mind, as sending a notice letter that someone says, oh, this is someone from the township, and just chucks it, and then comes in and complains when that building starts getting built. Well, we let you know, you know.
What
Yeah, Brian,
other folks think? Go ahead.
Isn't that part of a kind of an ongoing problem? You know, we have all these processes in place to kind of notify people early. They don't pay attention. And then by the time they finally crosses their radar, they're coming in and, you're way down the road, way past kind of a good time to kind of have input, because I mean, the process, right? Planning processes take a long time, and yeah, people ignore the initial letter. They don't even open it up until their neighbor complains about this thing that's going to happen. And then everybody gets out the pitchforks and.
Well, and that's, you see that, like, we had a recent rezoning where no one was saying anything, and then I sent notice letters out, and one neighbor, and then suddenly let everybody know, and then they came into the meeting. And that's the way, that's the purpose of the public meeting, that the public hearing is for those people to come in and talk. There's there's a requirement that I have to send notices to everyone within 300 feet. There's no requirement that says only people within 300 feet can come and talk, right? So that's an example of the system working. The problem with that is that you don't get that dialogue that Leroy's talking about. They all think the worst because their source of information is the reactionary neighbor at that point. I don't have an answer for that. If I did, then I would be a fellowship in AICP and just a member of AICP.
Well, the reactionary neighbors, people aren't trained in how to be good, involved citizens necessarily. But anyway, who else wants to chime into this who hasn't had a chance to say something?
I might mention I'm not sure how to put this all together, but for people to come to meetings to talk about their freedom of whether or not you can do whatever you do with your property and all this business, and really with the issues we're talking about are things like wildflowers and solar panels. But those people that come have formulated opinions about fossil fuel and climate change, and they don't necessarily come out in their argument. They just talk about their freedoms or not, or whatever side of the fence they're on. But the issue is really pretty deep within people of how they feel about where we are with this climate change issue. And if we're really going to get serious about it, it's got to be a cultural change where people are really all on board with it. I think anyway, because that's where we run into the resistances. People still wanting to drill. I mean, that whole philosophy. And they haven't really bought into the idea that we're in serious trouble yet. They just don't get it yet. So it's without that knowledge or that mental framework, there's going to be resistance to going in the right direction. And we're arguing about things that really aren't the root of the cause of the argument, I think, based on their real feelings. The other thing I just want to mention while I'm chatting here is just to shrink the world a little bit more, what Danielle was talking about with this cross-state trail. That was championed by a woman named Nancy Croupiers. I don't know if you know that name, but she lived, I'm trying to think of the subdivision, right there off of Green Road, Wood Valley or something. Or something, maybe not Wood Valley, but across the street from that. I'm not sure what it is. But on a tributary, it's to Mud Lake, the Mud Lake drain. And so I guess, if anybody's read that book yet, you'll notice toward the end, a number of people have that have engaged with that swamp have done some remarkable things, Tom Woody included. The Warbach family, Oscar Warbach, who did a great amount of cartooning back in the 50s and 60s with the DNR to educate people on nature. You know, some great stuff there. And his son, John Warbach, who then, you know, became a landscape architect and was involved in the master plan for Lake Lansing. So, and the list goes on. There's others that I'm not even mentioning right now, but certainly Rod Hagenbu is one who was on the township board years ago, in his work with developing the wetland ordinance by mistake, without even knowing what a wetland was. So these are things that happened years ago just by letting the Swamp Road Mud Lake rub off on you. So yeah, I'm kind of digressing, but getting back to the how we get people on board to come to meetings to talk intelligently in a framework that will support solar energy. We got a challenge. I guess that's where I'm going with that.
Thank you, Sam. Anybody else who hasn't had a chance to weigh in? Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, I wanted to switch topics real quick, so never mind.
Go ahead.
I just was curious if what anybody knows about the flooding at the Trader Joe's parking lot. I was told that it flooded and cars had to be towed.
From
I
Trader
haven't heard
Joe's?
that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first I've heard of it.
I haven't heard that either.
I'll look into it more. I don't remember what day it was. She said it was last week. So
Sometimes those things happen if there's a clogged drain too. You know what I mean?
but it's brand new.
I understand, but it could be too that during the construction, there was a lot of sediment that went in there and filled up.
I noticed at Whole Foods across the street that some of those kind of creative drainage system were getting clogged up with mulch. And so they were pooling in that area that is intended to deal with that stormwater on site. And so if you don't maintain those drains, it's not going to work properly. And someone needs to sort of wade down into that area, understand how it works, and clean that storm drain off. And it's not going to be the person going out for the shopping carts, probably.
No.
Although it might be.
I just heard about it, but I was told about it, but I hadn't heard anything or seen anything online, so I wasn't sure if anybody knew anything.
It seems like a big issue in this township is sort of development versus non-development. And, you know, people who live here want to preserve the natural areas, and then there's developers who want to develop. And Brian's got a different perspective, obviously, as a planner, but are we having a conversation about, if we are going to have a development, should we be doing low impact development? Who's going to make those decisions? Where are the next developments going to happen? And, you know, the township is interested in tax dollars, obviously. And is interested in a smooth development in a, you know, a nice looking neighborhood. But how do we find that balance? Do we want to kind of rethink our development standards? And who's on first, and what's our vision? And maybe this is an issue that Danielle can also help us with, like, what are some innovative things that are happening in other communities where they're finding this balance between, you know, sustainable growth, if that's such a thing, versus, you know, outright preservation. And
It being a little after 10 o'clock, I don't feel comfortable answering your question in a soundbite. If you want to follow this up later, I'd be curious what you mean. Like, this is the most environmentally progressive community I've ever been part of. We have this most stringent wetland boundary I've ever seen. And we know the easy, like we almost are built out. If you want to see a map of that I've put together of developable stuff. I can show that to you next week when we have some time to talk about it. We've built the easy stuff. I haven't heard, I hear people talk about, I hear more people talking about how we're going to develop than don't develop. No one, it's the rogues who say that. Without naming particular names, Leroy, you know who I mean. But no one is showing up at my planning commission saying, no, they don't have the right to develop. I don't want to say no one, but 90% of people are saying, no, they don't have they're not saying that. They're questioning the development. And that's a different conversation. But if you want to see just, if you want to have this in-depth conversation, I'm happy to have it with you. We don't have that much left.
Well, sounds like we got some material for next time. I'm sorry I lost track of time. Happy to keep chatting if people want to, but normally we try and keep it to 10 o'clock. But does anybody else have any parting comments? And thank you, Brian, for that offer. And I hope we do continue this conversation. Tom or Peter or anybody else who hasn't had a chance to, Roberta, you have any parting comments?
Leroy, some time ago, I think we had a discussion or at least a mention of a stand of poison hemlock growing on the Okemos Red Cedar River crossing, Okemos Road, Red Cedar River. And I noticed that stand of plants disappeared. Is there a story about that?
There is, I believe Emma went out with her Meridian Conservation Corps and may have dealt with it. I don't know the full story. Does anybody else? I know a resident had complained about it, and I think somebody from Parks may have dealt with it. I'm not sure. But good question.
I'm not complaining about it. There's no question they're dangerous plants. But,
I had somebody at the Green Fair ask for us to put a flyer out about poison hemlock and share that in our information. So that it might be something that you could help us figure out how to create a flyer for that. But I did on
Yes, I
Saturday,
can.
somebody said, we need to be telling people about poison hemlock. And I said, we actually talk about that quite a bit. So,
yeah, there's quite a bit of it around. I remember we used one of our trips to the market on Saturday morning. My wife, Linda, is in the car with me, and she points at a bunch of plants. And I said, oh, yeah, those are all poison hemlock. And she said, well, shouldn't we tell somebody? I said, well, it's pretty common stuff. And so I pointed out 6 or 10 other stands of it on our drive that morning, all adjacent to the road. And I thought, that's a lot of people to tell. It's practically a public service movement at that point. But and a lot of people have no clue either what it looks like or what it can do. So
is it safe to pull it out with gloves?
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, John, again for this good conversation and timely info, and everybody else for showing up, and good conversation. Again, if you've got a speaker you'd like to invite, or if you'd like to talk, host, suggest a topic, feel free to share it. Sam, good to see you, and talk to you next week, unless anyone else has any parting comments. Thanks,
Yes,
John.
just that if anyone wants help, if Sarah wants help making a flyer about poison hemlock, I have all the materials to help you do that.
Oh, I bet you have some great illustrations too.
Well, I haven't drawn any in the last decade or two, but I do have tons of pictures, digital images.
That would be what a nice offer.
That would be
And I'd
awesome.
be happy to help with that too. Maybe we can unleash our communications department, our Canva experts.
Sure. And I have access to InDesign if you want to use that to actually produce the printable layout in some way.
Great. Well, between the three of us, let's see what we can come up with. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Nice to see everybody.
Thanks, Leroy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Tom.
Good to see you, Leroy.
Nice to see you too.